Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this series that is sort of a glossary, handbook, dictionary of terminology that we often use when talking about narcissism or narcissistic relationships. The idea for this came from the fact that I was seeing so many people using so many different terms that are specific to this world, and I thought to myself, you know, it's really important that people know what these words mean and that we kind of have some uniform definitions. And so the goal of this series is to make sure that these terms or words make sense, that they enlighten you to some of the themes in these narcissistic relationships, and may even give you techniques for how to manage these relationships. Today, we're going to talk about the term no contact. Before I begin, I do ask, if you're enjoying what you're watching, please hit the subscribe bell and the notification. The subscribe, I think it says, is a word, and the bell that gives you notifications so you can be kept up to date on the content we have on this YouTube channel. So let's go ahead now and start talking about no contact. This is a term that many of you who have anything to do with a narcissistic relationship, you've heard this term. I want you to think about a toxic person in your life right now. Just think about it, whatever that narcissistic relationship is. Then, I want you to think about how it would feel to never talk to them again. Ever. Just stay with that feeling. I'm guessing that you are experiencing a mix of emotions: relief, fear, sadness, confusion, guilt, freedom. And that mix of emotion cuts to the core of why going no contact is so difficult. Let's talk a bit about what is meant by no contact and why it is such a hot topic in understanding narcissistic and toxic relationships. No contact is exactly what it sounds like. It's having no contact with the narcissistic person, no longer reaching out to them, but more importantly, no longer responding to them. I'm going to be honest with you, no contact works. And the reason it works is because, in general, narcissistic relationships really don't change. And there's nothing that you can do or that you can say to make the relationship less invalidating, to make it more respectful, and to make it more empathic. There just isn't. So as a result, every time that you have contact with these folks, you end up in the same place, and it feels awful. It is a white knuckle experience to ignore all communications from someone you're accustomed to constantly sparring with. In the age of technology, it's becoming easier. We can set numbers and emails and other notifications to block. We can block social media accounts. But the fact of the matter is, if a person wants to contact you, they will find a way. And that's where this all gets really tricky, because it can take a lot of psychological, cognitive bandwidth to keep blocking someone, especially someone that you are conflicted about. They're going to do all the kinds of things that they do. They're going to come up with new phone numbers and fake identities. They're going to try to find a way to get in. It almost becomes like a game for them. No contact, trying to maintain no contact under these circumstances, can start to feel like a full-time job. No contact works because it ends the air supply for the narcissist, or the narcissistic supply for the narcissist. In general, narcissist relationships are their source of supply. It's a place for them to regulate their emotions. In essence, their relationships involve other people being punching bags for the narcissist to rage, and once the narcissist is done raging and feel better, they don't stop to think whether their dysregulated and rageful tantrums actually hurt the other person. So no contact, most importantly, is a tool that lets you end these cycles. And that is what narcissistic relationships are about. unending toxic cycles. But I mean, I'm going to be honest, let's face it, it is not always possible and it is not always practical to go no contact. It's really hard, if not impossible, to truly go no contact, obviously with someone you live with, or with a boss that you report to, or to a mother that you may live next door to, or to an adult, or with an adult child that you may still see regularly. No contact really does kind of require the person to largely be out of your life. Now, people who are going through divorces with narcissists, they try no contact. They really do. Now, the fact is, true no contact cannot work if you have minor children together, because arrangements about custody and all of that need to be discussed, even if it's in a minimal way and there's 2 words exchanged at a drop-off. But it's also important that you talk with your attorney and your other advisors, because if you try to go true no contact with a parent with whom you share joint custody, frankly, it is going to backfire on you. So like I said, while you have minor children, no contact is simply not an option. Now, when you can go no contact, it definitely works. But there is a timeline to this. So for example, if you're divorced and you don't have kids, you can go no contact. So let's take a minute and talk about the timeline of what happens when you go no contact in a narcissistic relationship. Now, for a while, the amount of communication in your relationship is actually going to increase. You may not know it if you block them, but it will. They're going to keep trying to reach you. Be prepared for dozens, if not hundreds, of texts, emails, phone calls. They get angrier and angrier and sometimes even threatening over time. They may start trying nice, but then it goes angry quickly. They may threaten to blackmail you. They may threaten to tell other people terrible things about you, even if they're not true. They will keep doubling down until you break and you contact them. And then they will square off and scold you for you thinking that you could cut them out. So how dare you think you could cut me out? But if you're able to keep your nerve and stick with the no contact, just like any living creature that isn't getting any kind of reward. If the mouse won't work the maze unless there's cheese. If you don't give them a reward, they will fade away. They will move on to new sources of supply. Trust me, they will definitely continue to say terrible things about you, but they may stop bothering you and go away. Now, many people who go no contact will tell me that they feel like they have symptoms of post-traumatic stress for years, even after going no contact. They still maintain a fear that they will run into the narcissist somewhere, and they live in fear of that day. They feel fear even when they see a car that looks like the narcissist on the street. In many cases over time, the narcissist has lost interest. They may just say a few ugly words and move on. If you're fortunate, you no longer live near where the narcissist lives, so there's less of a chance of just running into them in the grocery store. Now, no contact also can get very complicated by other people. People will often call you out for not being a nice person. They're going to say, "Oh, you're being so harsh," or "Come on, I'm sure you can talk to them for just a minute. How bad could it be?" And this feels doubly awful because you feel as though you are being gaslighted and that your reality about the situation is being doubted. But you also may feel judged for going no contact, and that this idea that your point of view is not recognized, and the self-doubt that is such a classical part of narcissistic abuse may get activated, and then you crack. It takes a lot of fortitude and at least one person believing in you and what you're going through and supporting you to be able to sustain and stay strong with your no contact. Now, this person may be a close friend who knows what you've been through, someone else in the system, I don't know, who might be a counselor or a teacher or someone like that who may be going no contact too. It may be a therapist who understands what you're going through. For many people, the guilt of no contact can really make no contact feel like a catch-22 again. Some people feel that while being in contact is terrible and taxes your energy and it just feels toxic and awful, that cutting off the narcissist triggers so much guilt in them. And there's lots of reasons for this. A person who has experienced narcissistic abuse often comes from a family of origin where guilt was a major part of the dynamic. And people with other factors, like they're very prone to anxiety, may also be prone to guilt. The guilt becomes a bigger target issue for you to work on in your own counseling or therapy. But I cannot tell you how many narcissistic relationships I have witnessed that have been kept in place for decades and even for lifetimes because a person felt guilty about cutting the narcissistic person out. But here now is the other clincher. Narcissists are so good at playing the victim, and as such, they pull for guilt from other people. They'll try things like saying things like, how could you stop being in touch with me when I've always been there for you? Which is gaslighting. And I gave you money or whatever it is that the narcissists think they did. Or they frame it. The narcissistic person will frame it as, I can't believe you're doing this to me. I'm going through such a difficult time. How could you do this at such a difficult time for me? Now, of course, a narcissist is never quite going to see the irony of the many, many, many times that they let you down and were nowhere to be found when you were struggling. But you know what they're going to say. Oh, when I'm going through such a hard time, blah, 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 blah. When I'm going through a deadline, when my mother is sick, when I'm focusing on my sobriety, when I'm just starting therapy to be a better person for you, I don't know, when I am having money problems, and on and on and on. And these are the manipulations they will use to play on guilt. So you don't think about going no contact or to break your pattern of no contact. Now, what if you go no contact and then you slip up? It happens. It happens all the time. And I always tell people, please be kind to yourself when that happens. If you blame yourself or if you feel foolish because you slipped up on no contact, it can make you even more vulnerable to the narcissist's abuse and the narcissist's manipulations. Now listen, it happens to the best of us. Now, you might wonder, why do people, why did I slip, why did anyone slip, why do people slip when they go no contact? I hate to say it, it's sometimes as simple as because they're curious. Because enough time has passed doing your no contact, you get stuck in euphoric recall, and you only start remembering some of the good stuff and forget all of the bad, and there's a lot more bad than good. Because you feel stronger now, and you might feel like you can handle the narcissist, and maybe you can, but because narcissistic relationships are so much like an addiction, and you feel pulled back to the dysfunction and the high highs you felt in that situation, it's so easy to fall back into it. There are lots of reasons that people crack or break when they are going no contact. It happens. I also tell people that the minute it turns toxic again, if you do slip and you do break your no contact, when it slips and goes toxic, you can turn it off again. But the problem is that the narcissist now knows that someday you may come back around. So what do? They keep trying. You have to be careful, because the cycle of going no contact And then letting them back in can get very messy. And then you can just keep going into this back and forth, highs and lows, finding yourself stuck in that cycle, like the initial love bombing that happens when the narcissist tries to win you back after you go no contact. But then inevitably, they will devalue you and they will discard you, because that's what they do. And the fact is, they'll devalue you more because they think they can play you. And then you might start getting addicted to the no contact cycles as a way to keep those highs and all of that in place. Don't do it. It's a difficult and unhealthy cycle. If you're going to go no contact, really try to commit to it. No contact does work when you give it a chance. It's not even a strategy that you can adequately judge for yourself and your situation until you've really done it for about a month, maybe 4 to 6 weeks. You need to pay attention to how you feel, because yeah, I know you're going to feel guilty, you're going to feel confused, you're going to feel lost, but you also have to pay attention to that sense of relief. Pay attention to how it feels to not have to deal with someone who is constantly criticizing you and undermining you, controlling you, gaslighting, and letting you down on a daily basis. Really pay attention to that feeling of what it feels like to not just always be invalidated. So even on your hardest no contact day, that new feeling of lightness, of relief, of freedom, and a new little sliver of hope can really get you through the dark days and make the ongoing no contact days easier. Now, what about when you can't go no contact, but you really need to because the relationship is so toxic and so awful? Now that's where we can do a bit of, we can call it a modified no contact. And it's a lot of what we do when we gray rock. And gray rock, as you know, is also a video in this series. But this kind of modified no contact means a very, very superficial level of engagement. And again, the gray rock series will spell out how to do that. But there's also one other slice of hope when it comes to no contact. For the most fortunate people, one day, and this is a good day, you become indifferent to your narcissist. It doesn't always happen, but it can. And you may literally get to the place where you do not give a damn about what happens to your narcissist, good or bad. You don't care if he gets married. You don't really even care if she gets hit by a bus. You don't care if he wins $1 million. You don't care if she loses it all and has no place to go. You just don't care. And that is a good moment. Because in some ways, at that point, no contact doesn't matter. Because even if they did contact you, their once absolutely formidable powers of manipulation and coercion and charm and charisma, they no longer work. You want to know why? Because you don't care. It's the top of the narcissistic abuse recovery mountain. And when that happens, no contact just becomes normal. It's just like, oh, why would I stay in touch with someone who just feels like an absolute stranger in many ways? So let's go back to the beginning. Let's talk about what it would feel like to cut that toxic narcissist out of your life forever right now. Understand that it will be a mix of feelings, that some days will be harder than others, but also recognize that being near anything toxic is never good for us. No contact is not something, sadly, that everyone in a narcissistic relationship can use. But if you can, in most cases, you will see that before you know it, it's like losing a lot of psychological weight and now living in a state of clarity and self-compassion. Honestly, when you go no contact for long enough, if something happens that punctuates it, that breaks through, that you have to have contact, family funeral or something like that, something that forces you to break it, when you practice that no contact muscle for long enough, when you finally do have to have contact, whether it's indifference or something else, you may not at all feel the powerful suck of their magnetism and their vortex. It is a powerful technique. It's not one that's available to everyone. But over time, you'd be surprised. One day, even if it's a divorce and you did have kids, once those kids grow up, you'd be surprised that one day you might actually be able to go no contact in every narcissistic relationship you have. Give it a shot on the ones you can. I hope this clarifies what no contact is, and that the rest of the series is clarifying all these sort of glossary terms of narcissism. If you're enjoying this, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so we can keep you abreast of all the content that comes through on this particular YouTube channel on narcissism and narcissistic relationships. And if there's a topic in this series that we didn't hit upon that you think belongs here, please drop it down in the suggestions. Watch all 21 days, but even if you don't want to wait, you're like, I want to know if you're going to be doing an episode on this, drop it here. Hopefully we're already doing it, but I am absolutely open to taking on the other terms you think are important. Thanks again. Thanks again. Thanks again.